Hey guys, how's it going? Today's video is going to be my 5 least favorite books that I read this year. Before I get into it, I just want to say this doesn't necessarily mean that these are bad books. And there's actually one book on here that a lot of people really like, but these are just the books that I enjoyed the least. I'm going to be doing the 5 that I liked the least, but my next video is going to be my favorite books of 2019 video, and for that one I'm doing my top 10. Because I just want more positivity than negativity, and honestly, I had a really good reading year, and there was more favorite books than disliked books, so it was great. Coming in at number 5 is a book that I actually borrowed from my library on audiobook, but it is The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu by Joshua Hammer. Now, I did end up giving this book a 5 out of 10, but it was one of my least favorite books, mostly because of marketing. I mentioned this in my wrap-up, but look at this cover, look at that name. That makes it sound like it's some sort of adventure story, or, I don't know, it almost looks middle grade to me. It's not, it's just a history story, and it's written like a history textbook. It's not at all what I expected, it's not what I was really in the mood for. I do like very dry historical stories sometimes, so I still enjoyed it, which is why I got a 5 out of 10. But that wasn't what I was looking for, and I think a lot of people honestly would really dislike this story if they went in looking for like a fun adventure story and came out with a dry history lesson. Even the synopsis, it makes it sound like it's this like group of rogue librarians smuggling these books out of the country and all that stuff. And that is part of it, but the book very strongly focuses on the wars and why different leaders came into power, and it's very political and historical. And again, I enjoyed that because I like that kind of story, but that is not what I was looking for, and that's why this book, I think, deserves its place on the list. Coming in at number 4 is technically City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare, which is the 4th in the Mortal Instruments series. Comet, what are you doing? Excuse me, ma'am. So technically City of Fallen Angels was my least favorite of the books, but I'm just going to hold up this one because first of all, I only own the first 2 books, and the series as a whole I'm kind of just lumping together. City of Fallen Angels was definitely my least favorite. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 10 just because of the ending, but up until then it was a solid 2 out of 10. But some of the books really weren't that bad. I just really didn't like the Mortal Instruments series, and this is what I was saying. This book is a lot of people's favorites. This series is a lot of people's favorite. A lot of people loved this series. I'm not one of those people. It's very young YA, teenage drama, stupid love triangles, whiny teenagers, and I don't care. I couldn't care less about any of the characters. They were all so annoying and immature. I'm glad that I read it, so at least I now have an opinion, and now at least I know what people are talking about when they do talk about this story. But no, it's not for me. Everybody is whiny. I hated the love triangles because I didn't care who they ended up with. They should all be single. Also, nobody's allowed to be single. That really bothered me. Honestly, if I wasn't a completionist and if I wasn't already planning on doing a video about reading the whole series, which I'll link above and below, I wanted to finish the series. I would have definitely DNF'd book 4 and not looked back. But I finished it. Some of them did get better, but this was not a book I enjoyed. Coming in at number 3 was The Pleasure of My Company by Steve Martin. I gave this a 4 out of 10. There was something oddly enjoyable about it. That's why the rating isn't much lower, but it wasn't a good book in my opinion. The parts that I did enjoy, it was more just that I was almost enjoying how bad it was getting, if that makes sense. So the rating was bumped up a little bit because of that, but I would not recommend this book at all. It's about a man who I'm pretty sure has OCD. It doesn't say OCD on the page, but the way they describe it and the way that he's thinking, it's OCD. But I think the depiction is terrible. It's really almost offensive. Like, it's really badly done. It's inconsiderate. And one thing that I cannot stand is the main character always brushes everything he does off by saying he's crazy. It bothers me because, as I've mentioned multiple times, OCD is not a psychotic disorder, it's an anxiety disorder, so you can't use that word. Also, I feel like when you're using that word to describe your mental illness, it should be done in a more respectful way or by somebody who actually would fit that mental illness. This character did not. As far as I know, this author has no personal experience with OCD, so I don't think he should be using that word, but that's just a pet peeve of mine. But honestly, this book was just so badly done in that respect. It wasn't an interesting book either, and the main character was terrible. He's really weirdly obsessed with this woman and acting like he has the right to be that way, and when it's kind of challenged that that's not okay, he uses the crazy excuse for why he's going to do it anyways. They've never actually met before. He just watches her outside his window because she's a real estate agent that works in the building across from him, so she's always showing different apartments in the building. And he just watches her all the time and just imagines, you know, how attracted to him she's going to be as soon as she sees him, and just, it's really icky. I found the plot was all over the place and didn't make any sense. There really wasn't any redeeming qualities about this book other than the fact that it was almost so bad it was funny, and that's why it rated a little bit higher, but like I said, would not recommend. Coming in at number 2, The Sacred Bones by Michael Burns. I had such high hopes for this book. It just sounded so interesting and the concept was really fascinating, and I was so curious to see how it was going to be executed, and it just fell so flat. Basically, an ancient artifact was stolen from Jerusalem and sold to the Vatican, and they hired these 2 scientists to come in and make sure it was really authentic because they believe that it was the bones of Jesus Christ. And it's essentially a very, like, religion, but in a political way, because the Vatican obviously doesn't want these to be Jesus's bones because that would undermine something in the Bible and counter it and all of the drama that would cause. And meanwhile, in Jerusalem, they don't know exactly what was stolen, so they're trying to find out, and they don't know if it's like a religious-based like crime or if it was something about what was stolen or what the heck is going on. And it's just really interesting sounding, but it fell so flat. And they had such an interesting kind of subplot going. The main scientist that's studying these bones, she actually recently found out that she has bone cancer, and the main reason why she took this job is so she can fly to the other side of the world, doesn't have to deal with it because she hasn't told her fiance yet, and all of that drama, which would have been a really interesting subplot, but they dropped the ball on it so much. This book was really just very dry, very slow, and it was mostly just like her walking around Rome, and it really wasn't well done. I kind of want to spoil the ending. I've never heard of this book before, so if you do plan on reading this, go to this time if you don't want spoilers, but I'm going to tell you how it ends because it makes me mad. In the end, the whole mystery of is it or is it not Jesus, they don't know. All signs point to yes, and their DNA doesn't make any sense, so it's implied that they are, but they don't actually come out and say it. They just leave it as a maybe, which I think is just a cop-out. Like, if you're gonna do a mystery like this, pick an answer. Don't go with maybe. That's just stupid. They extract some of his DNA to try to figure out, you know, kind of who he is, or at least what race he is, because, you know, it's just a skeleton. It's hard to tell those kind of things. And they see that he doesn't have any race. Like, he's pretty much a blank slate, which implies that he's Jesus, apparently. But anyways, he has this magic DNA, and they use that magic DNA to inject it into the main character to magically cure her bone cancer. It is so dumb. I really hate it because it was such an interesting subplot. There was just so many things she could have done with it, and she never had any moments of sickness. She never did anything with the illness. Like, it was just something in the back of her mind. And then her fiance flies out to see her, and she finally breaks down and tells him. And he was like, oh yeah, I know, I saw your medication. Oh, also, here's the cure. It was really, really annoying. So yeah, this book, I didn't like it, would not recommend, I'm sorry. And finally, my least favorite book that I read this year, The Skinning Tree by Srikumar Sen. I gave this a 3 out of 10, but honestly it's probably closer to a 2. Basically, it takes place in India during the Second World War when the Japanese are invading, and a little boy gets sent to a boarding school to keep him safe, essentially, and it's really boring and I don't like the writing style, and it was really hard to get behind. Like, it sounded like a really, like, dark and twisted story. And, like, look at this cover, look at this font. It looks so, like, creepy and uncomfortable. And it's not. Basically, the synopsis makes it sound like it's this little boy who was raised, how do they describe it? He lives in a Calcutta family where sophisticated British habits such as bridge at dinner parties coexist with Indian values and nationalism. So he lives in kind of a more British lifestyle, and then he gets sent to the boarding school, which is very Indian. But you really don't see any of that. He doesn't have any sort of, like, clash of cultures or anything like that. And maybe this is just my own ignorance because I don't know enough about the culture to be able to see it, but he pretty much fit in just fine. He just didn't know the rules of the place. And they make it sound like the teachers and instructors are really cruel and twisted, and like they torture these kids and they're just horrible, horrible people. And they're not. They're not nice. Like, they do anytime the kids mess up, or if they don't make the bed perfectly, then they spank them, stuff like that. They hit them on the knuckles with a cane. That's pretty much the worst of it. And I'm not saying that that's a fine thing. Like, you shouldn't beat children regardless. But it's not sick and twisted and torture. It's just crossing the line with discipline. But also, if you think about the time period this was set in, that's not really that abnormal. Basically, what the book is trying to convey is that these kids being influenced by these terrible teachers are taking on their cruel traits. But they're not that cruel, and the kids aren't that cruel. There is some animal cruelty in this, which it mentions on the back, mindlessly killing animals and hanging their skins on a cactus. But not that it's not a big deal, but it's mostly like the lizards that are always kind of crawling around. They're treated more like pests that they just like stomp on, which is not okay, but I wouldn't call that mindlessly butchering or anything like that. And as far as hanging their skins on a cactus, they just throw it over the fence, like the bodies, and they just land on this cactus that's outside of their little perimeter. And I don't know, it's not that this book isn't dark, but it's not nearly as dark as it makes it sound like it is. Also, this is just such a poorly written book, in my opinion. Our narrator is 9 years old, and it's written like a 9-year-old, but not in a way that makes it feel authentic, in a way that makes it feel childish. Something they did so many times in the story is they would tell you what happened, and then go back and show you what happened, but write it in a way that you didn't already know. Like, it almost just seemed like they were treating us like we were really, really dumb as the reader, and I hate that. It's so annoying. Also, there are so many typos and errors in this book. I know that might just be a me thing, and obviously not everything is going to be perfect, but there are so many that it's actually ridiculous and very distracting. Also, the whole point of this book is that in the very beginning it tells you that one of the, like, headmaster type people, one of the teachers in charge, is killed. And supposedly this whole book you're trying to figure out who killed her, how it happened, etc. But they don't even talk about it until, like, the very last chapter. They talk about it in the first chapter and the last chapter. The rest of it, she's not even really in it much. In my opinion, it should have been written in a way that, you know, all of these boys are slowly descending into darkness, and you're trying to see, okay, which one of them actually snaps and kills the teacher. And honestly, it's not that at all. It's actually really, really boring. I'm going to tell you how it ends, actually, because I'm not recommending this book. So skip ahead 30 seconds if you don't want to hear it. Basically, she's just trying to pick this apple from this tree that's kind of over a ledge, and then she slips and she falls. And the whole twisted concept is that the little boys see her, but then the bell rings and they have to get back to class, and they're afraid of getting in trouble, and they think that she's fine, so they go back to class. And then she falls to her death. It really is so lackluster and really anticlimactic. And overall, I really didn't like this book. I couldn't care about the characters. The story was really bland. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't written well. It wasn't formatted well. So unfortunately, this was definitely the least favorite book that I read this year. So there you have it. Those are the 5 least favorite books that I read this year. Like I said, it was honestly a pretty good reading year for the most part, but there were definitely a couple misses. and that was what these were. But like I said, stay tuned for my next video, which is going to be my 10 favorite books of the year, where I just gush about all of the books that I absolutely loved, and I am very excited for that one. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button to let me know, and subscribe so you can see my favorites video and any other videos I post. I post reading and writing related videos every Wednesday and Sunday. So I hope to see you guys next time, and until then, have a great day. Bye!